All right, well, good evening, everyone. Today is November 12th, 2024, and this is the Cortez City Council work session. It's 6 p.m., and I'd like to call this meeting to order. We're going to start with item A on our agenda, which is a presentation by Stantec on the South Broadway area-wide development plan.
We're just waiting for it to come up on the screen. Okay, it looks like we're up on the screen, Rhonda. So I think you are live. I'll just, greetings, council. My name is Rachael Marchbanks. I'm the Community and Economic Development Director. And with us today, we have Rhonda Bell from Stantec, who is our contractor who has been working on our South Broadway area-wide plan. I'll let her give you some background on that, and so I think you can take it away, Rhonda.
Fantastic. How's my sound? You can hear me?
It
Yes.
sounds good.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here and tell you where we are on this project. As Rachel said, my name is Rhonda Bell. I am a planner with Stantec, and I'm here to talk about the South Broadway Corridor area-wide planning, which is part of a Brownfields grant. So we have 4 parts to the presentation to talk about tonight. A very quick overview. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the Brownfield grant and other efforts that are going on. A look at community priorities and vision for South Broadway that were identified during this process. The draft strategy, that is to say recommendations, that we're looking at, and then the next steps. I understand that this is a presentation and we have time for questions afterwards, but I'm also happy to answer questions as we go along if you'd prefer to do it that way. Project overview, a little bit of information on the project. So as I said, this is part of an EPA Brownfield grant. CDPHE, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, is the grantee. It's a $2 million grant from the Environmental Protection Agency, and Cortez is one of 4 named communities in that grant, meaning they have priority for the funds. If those 4 communities don't use all the funds, then any community in Colorado can apply for them. And it is 100% grant funded, meaning there is no match. The city does not have to put up any money, and the money is available for 3 years or until it's all used. It is for the inventory, assessment, planning, and assessment level activities of brownfields. There are different funds available, not this grant, for actual cleanup and mitigation activities. So for this grant, the eligible planning activities are special studies. Those might be phase 1 and phase 2 environmental site assessments to determine if sites have contamination and what kind. Site-specific reuse planning, that's usually on a single site or a single parcel, applied for by the owner who's interested in getting down a vision or an idea or test fit of what might fit on the property. And then area-wide planning, which is what we're talking about today. And area-wide planning is typically done, I always say that it's so that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Area-wide planning is done along a corridor like South Broadway or an area where there are more than one brownfield site, so that planning them together can raise the level of those properties as well as bring up the whole area that they're found in. Very quickly, the definition of a brownfield is up here on screen, and I think we probably have a pretty good idea of what brownfields is, but there is one part that I want to point out about this definition, which is that it is the potential presence of hazardous substance pollutants or contaminants. So that means to be part of this study and to benefit from this grant money, a site doesn't have to be a known brownfield. Even suspecting that that site has some kind of contamination on it can depress current uses or depress redevelopment. I'm going to interrupt myself a second. Dave Laney, also from Stantec, has joined me on the call, and he is the project manager for the entire Brownfields program. Dave, did you want to add anything, or should we keep rolling on? And you're muted.
Yes, I'd just like to say that there are a lot of properties for which the prior use is not well documented, and the brownfield grant can be used to help do assessments on those properties in order to make them attractive to investors and developers. So that's one of the advantages of having access to grant funds like this particular grant.
And that's an ongoing activity, right, Dave? There is still
That's
money
correct.
available for that right now.
Right.
Okay, excellent. So then moving on, the study area for this area-wide plan, it's approximately a mile on South Broadway, and it goes from about just a little bit north of 3rd Street in the north to, there's no roadway, Chronic Therapy in the south. And the yellow is the boundary, and it is predominantly, but not exclusively, commercial parcels. You will notice that Mesa Elementary School is within the boundary, as well as a portion of the middle school property and the mobile home community that's north of 7th Street. But it is predominantly vacant and commercial parcels. Area-wide planning. So what is area-wide planning? As you can see up in the right-hand corner of the slide, it's a vision and action plan for a defined focus area. So we go through a couple of typical components. For the South Broadway area-wide plan, we started in March. We kicked it off with an existing conditions analysis and a brownfields property inventory, which identifies the properties in and around, along, on South Broadway that are known or suspected of being brownfields based on prior use, current conditions. Then we did some public outreach to establish vision and local priorities. We create an urban framework plan, which is really looking at potential physical enhancements as well as revitalization strategies and initiatives, which are the policy companions to those physical improvements. We created an action plan, which lists out the recommendations, the phasing, who's responsible, and what's involved. And you can see community engagement goes throughout all of this. And we are in letter E there, which means we have a draft urban framework plan and recommendations, and that's what we're going to tell you about today. Gather any comment you have, and then we'll move on to those final elements of documenting the plan. This is just a reminder. I always like to put this up there. As you can see, and as you are well aware, planning is aspirational. It is also long-term. None of these recommendations are expected to be completed by next year or even 3 years. Some of them might be what we call low-hanging fruit, and others will take a lot longer. Not all of the ideas that go into this plan will get done, and there will be some things that get done that aren't in this plan as opportunities evolve. Some ideas will require private property. Some ideas might require agency cooperation, most notably CDOT, since South Broadway is a state highway. The graphic here, I like to say, shoot for the moon, even if you miss, will land among the stars. So big ideas to help move South Broadway forward. Priorities and vision. So how did we come up with community priorities and vision? I said I'm a planner, but I'm really the facilitator, here to have what the community needs and wants put together and make it all make sense in a framework. So we formed a project working group, which has about 15 people on it. We've met, I believe, 4 times during this process for them to tell us what they see for the area, to react to ideas that we have put forward. We also put out a community survey. It was open for 2 weeks in April of this year, and we got a stunning 970 survey responses. I'd like to congratulate you. That's one of the highest survey responses I've ever gotten in a community survey. We've also done interviews with city staff and stakeholder interviews with some individuals and small groups that have an interest in South Broadway. Based on that information, we came up with, floated in the project working group list, 8 priorities. They're not necessarily in order, but they are loosely color-coded by category. So those first 2 really have to do with safety and cleanup. The middle 3 that are blue are about connecting the corridor, making South Broadway part of Cortez instead of just that roadway that goes by the side. And then the last ones are really about attracting new land uses, new activities, and really getting more people and more things to do on South Broadway. Based on those priorities, we created a vision statement, which is up on the screen. That South Broadway is a mix, more so than now, of all sorts of uses, retail, commercial, and entertainment. And it also serves both the local populations as well as regional tourists and guests. And I do want to note, just as a side note, the majority of South Broadway right now is zoned C, commercial. So you'll see that residential is not in this statement. Residential is allowed on South Broadway, but only as a secondary use, not as a primary use. Like, we won't be recommending a new residential development. Strategies or recommendations. So to support the vision and the goals, we have 4 buckets, 4 categories that the recommendations fit into. The first one is about land use, about revitalizing properties and bringing them into best use or back into productive use if they're vacant or unvitalized, I guess we'd say. The second one is about transportation. We heard a lot from the community about safety, particularly for pedestrians and cyclists. Creating a sense of community is the third bucket. That's really about amenities, the looks of the corridor. And then the last one is about marketing and getting the word out and really attracting new uses to the corridor. So those are buckets. Our recommendations fit into those, and so we'll go through some of those now. So first one, revitalize the properties. The strategic actions, recommendations associated with this first strategy are the parcels that are marked on here in yellow are seen as catalysts or opportunities in some way. So the catalyst sites are really the ones that we've just marked in red. They're numbered 1.1 and 1.2. I'm not sure how big your screen is in the room you're sitting in. So 1.2 and 1.9, that's the more northern ones. That's the Johnson building and the property across from it. And we've identified those as a catalyst property because they're right to the entrance, not only of Broadway, but also the entrance to Cortez. So redeveloping and revitalizing those parcels will really create a bookend that sets a new character and a new tone for South Broadway. The bigger parcel, it's actually 2 parcels below that that's labeled as 1.1. They're both vacant right now. And we identified those as catalyst sites because along the entire corridor, they're really the biggest parcels that could take a new large footprint use. And that could be something like hospitality, it could be some sort of custom built activity or entertainment. But definitely our recommendation would be to take advantage of the large amount of land available in those. Next, there are some parcels that we would call adaptive reuse, and 2 of the 3 that we've marked here are already in some stage of progress, which is great news. So the Johnson building shows up again. Recently switched hands, and there is interest in doing something new, really having that space better tenanted and better used, possibly mixed use, as I said, with residential above. It could be office, commercial, retail. There could be amenities on the site. Over on the right-hand side, the east side, that is the Mesa Verde property, which is moving towards being renovated into housing as opposed to a hotel. And then, as I said at the beginning, this plan is about opportunities. So the 2 parcels that are marked in the north part, they're numbered 1.7. They're an opportunity, but this plan does not intend to single out or place a target on any businesses. Those 2 parcels are currently occupied by True West Auto Sales and Napa, but they are marked as adaptive reuse because on the entire corridor, there's actually not that many buildings that could be reused that are sort of like warehouse-sized shell buildings that could be used for something like light manufacturing, like an outdoor company wants to come in or something along those lines. So not a target on those, but if those businesses relocate, they are an opportunity for a business that wants to come in and occupy an existing building instead of building from scratch. Those are also buildings that could be used for entertainment uses, not exactly experiential retail, but we'll talk about that more later in this presentation. The idea of getting activities on the corridor, things to do, family-friendly things to do. Priority 2, promote multimodality. sorry, it's cut off at the top there. Some of the strategic actions that come in this bucket, if you will, are intersection signalization, and you can see we've got the intersection of McElmo marked as hopefully a location that we could get a new signalized intersection. Slight improvements to the existing signal at 7th, and that would be filling in and creating the crosswalk on the 4th leg. If you've been out there, if you can recently, if you remember, there are marked crosswalks on the east, west, and north side of the intersection, but nothing on the south. So having that 4th intersection would really signal priority for pedestrians, and is an advantage because Mesa Elementary School is on the south side of the roadway to create something that's continuous so you don't have out of direction travel. Also marked on here, far in the future, would potentially be a signal at 4th Street. And the idea of that is both because it is near the middle school, and as we see more redevelopment on the west side of Broadway, there might be a larger desire to walk across that intersection. But also because if we had signalized intersections at these 3 locations, it breaks the corridor down into even bites so that pedestrians and cyclists and cars find it easier to move from one side of the roadway and businesses on either side at regular intervals instead of the single signalized intersection that exists right now at 7th. Also in tandem, another multimodal improvement is down there near the McElmo Star. You'll see a pink dashed line, and that is suggesting a trail extension from the Mesa View Trail. Currently connects the Hawkins Preserve to the parking lot next to Mesa Elementary. It is possible, given the grading, to put a connection up so that people could use that trail as an alternate to being on Broadway and get to the McElmo intersection. We wouldn't recommend making that segment until that intersection is signalized because we don't want to encourage more people to play Frogger at an unsignalized intersection. Other improvements that come under this bucket is residential access, and I think we have a slide on that. Let me skip ahead. There are 2 mobile home communities in this corridor. One is near 4th and one is on 7th, and both of those currently only have right-in, right-out access on Broadway. The thought was that both of them have availability put in a short segment of roadway that could give them access to a back roadway, and then in the case of 7th Street, those residents could come out to a signalized intersection. In the case of the upper one, they could come out, if not to a signalized intersection, at least a full movement intersection. Now I skipped ahead. Pedestrian and cyclist infrastructure, as I said, we heard a lot about pedestrian and cyclist safety. So the hope is to create new infrastructure both on Broadway and parallel to Broadway so that people have a choice. These are 2 sample sections. Each one is possible within the right-of-way on 7th Street. So the concept would be, because 7th Street already has a signal, introducing enhanced pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. 7th Street, it would go the whole way down to the high school and Walmart. There's also the opportunity to take this sort of cross-section up Chestnut Street so that there is a safer, more defined connection between Main Street and Broadway without having to go right down Broadway. Similarly, if you prefer to go down Broadway, these are 2 possible sections for Broadway. The important thing to notice here is that there are no changes on Broadway itself between the curbs. So the shoulder, the drive lanes, the medians stay the same. We recognize it's a CDOT roadway. So we're stretching for new infrastructure, but kind of making it reasonable and not completely infeasible. So the goal is to create separated infrastructure on one side of the roadway. Here you see it on the west side. So in the upper image, it's a single directional bike lane, a planting zone, and a sidewalk, or in the bottom one, it's a bidirectional bike lane with that same separation. Then on the other side of the roadway, we have either a multi-use path or just a widened sidewalk. The reasons it's not symmetrical is we want to recognize it is a very, very big undertaking to get complete sidewalk and complete infrastructure on Broadway. So by focusing on one side, it makes it a smaller bite to do. And when we choose east or west, When you look at the existing buildings on Broadway, the buildings on the western side tend to be set back a little bit further than they are on the east side, so that there is more opportunity to put in what is a wider behind the curb section. There's also some other multimodal policies might be recommended, and that would be things like possibly prohibiting drive-throughs so that the auto-centric nature of the corridor can transition to a more human-oriented corridor. Consolidating curb cuts. Every time there's a driveway or a curb cut, it's potential conflict with pedestrians and cyclists. So there are cases where the curb cuts don't need to be as wide as they are, or one curb cut instead of two, things like that. Certainly speed control, we heard a lot about. I know there was a study done just recently that did not find warrant to drop the speed limit, but that there is a safe routes to school study going on right now. We'll see what that says. Even if neither of those have a warrant to drop the speed limit, as more development comes in on South Broadway and there's more cross traffic going in and out, that could create warrants. So it merits continuing to just have an open dialogue with CDOT, both about the speeds as Broadway redevelops and just about best practices. That moves us on to the third strategy, which is creating a sense of community. And one of the things that we would like to recommend has to do with public parks. There are some really great public parks in Cortez. None of them are super close by South Broadway. And I know we have heard some concern that there was an idea for a larger community regional park in the old high school site, but that plans are a little up in the air. So this plan looks at recommending a smaller space, closer to Broadway, but not on Broadway, given the speed and the nature of Broadway, so that the local residents can really feel this is their own. They could walk or cycle there. It could benefit local businesses with small events, or residents could have small programming. I want to emphasize this is showing a particular location on the north side of 7th Street. Mesa Elementary School is down and to the right. Mesa Verde is up and to the left. It doesn't have to be in this exact spot. There are a number of parcels between Broadway and Mesa Elementary School on the north side that could be a good candidate for a small park like this. So this is just an example of what it might look like. Imagine how it could be used, but we're, again, not singling out this particular parcel. Once the city could acquire or get an easement on property and decide where it went, then it would go into full design. But this plan is a high-level concept, just the idea of adding open space. Other items to create a sense of community are gateway enhancements. Those would be related to what we had marked as those catalyst parcels at the south end of Broadway, the Johnson Building. There is a gateway monument right now that says Cortez. Given the speed of the roadway, it is very easy to miss. So something that would be a gateway both to the South Broadway corridor and to Cortez in general is an idea. Something that was very well received when we discussed with the project working group was the idea of experiential businesses. This came from something we heard on the community survey, which is people really want things to do, particularly after school activities, family-friendly things to do. Visitors go to Mesa Verde for the day and then come back to Cortez for their hotels. They need other things to do. So experiential businesses can be large and custom built. So those are like the pickleball there, or the bounce in the bottom, and not putting them into like putting the names on the slides. These are businesses like Dave & Buster's, Bounce Empire, Chicken and Pickle, things like that combine an activity usually with a restaurant or a retail. And those could be uses that you see going in that southern parcel that we said that are big and vacant and can take a big footprint. Experiential business can also be small. It can be a storefront, like paint your own pottery, or a community workshop where you don't have to have all your own tools, but you can come and make something. Or one of my favorites, down in the lower corner, a board games and shop. So you pay $10, you go in and you can play board games for, 2 or 3 hours. That would be a great after-school activity. Design standards to really set what the city expects along South Broadway. Public art, and we did hear about billboards. I know there has been some effort to take those down, but a stronger effort that really sets a sunset date on those. And then lastly, marketing and branding the corridor. With all of these things happening, also bringing in new community events and traditions that could be unique to South Broadway to help support the idea that it's a real neighborhood, a part of Cortez that has its own personality, potentially investigating a business association, and that could be for maintenance of improvements. It could be mentoring of entrepreneurs. There's a lot of different models and activities that a business association could do and take some of the lift off of the city. Branding and promotion, giving South Broadway its own identity and putting that into wayfinding signage. What this image is a wayfinding family, we call it, so that the signage is calibrated to, so automobile signs are for Broadway going at 40 miles an hour are not the same as pedestrian and bicycle signs. Using that brand on all those and helping people move around the corridor and go into the neighborhoods and nearby amenities like Hawkins Preserve. And also another one of my favorite things is looking at what kind of interim uses we might be able to identify for those parcels, the vacant parcels or the underutilized parcels before they're redeveloped. So again, making South Broadway look active and vital all the time. So, next steps. Next step is to hear your comments and questions if you have any. We will modify the materials we have based on all the input we've got. But really the next step is, as I said, writing that report and then creating this action plan matrix, which identifies, as you can see, the recommendations, and then it matches it to those community priorities so that people, the city or whomever is charged with implementing this plan in the future knows why each of these items is doing, so that when those items that aren't in the plan come up, you can evaluate them against the priority. Does it support the priority or does it not? And then also looking at phasing, who is the lead, the champion, and the partners and the resources that are necessary. Thank you for your time. And I'm happy to go back to any slides, answer any questions, or take any comments.
I see several times we have CDOT coordination. I'm the old, come on, CDOT guy. What do you do with CDOT to get them to coordinate with you? Are you a liaison, or how does that work?
Hear that, Rhonda?
I didn't. Can you repeat it?
So Council Member Spruill is asking, how can we encourage CDOT to coordinate with us some more on these ideas?
Great question. We did have representation from CDOT, although not representing CDOT, somebody as a citizen who does work with CDOT on the project working group. I think it's really socializing this plan with them, requesting meetings. When we as planners have dealt with CDOT before, we often go to CDOT and ask them, as we're documenting in this plan, these are the goals we'd like to accomplish. How can you help us instead of making demands of we want X, Y, and Z. So it's really going to CDOT in the spirit of collaboration. As to how you can set up regular meetings, I think that's asking, and I guess I don't have a magic bullet for that. I'm sorry.
So our biggest roadblock in this whole thing is going to be CDOT. Can you hear me okay, or would you like me to go to a different microphone?
Can you hear him?
I can come down there.
Rachel, I think it's difficult for me to hear the council members, so if you can just repeat any questions, that would be super helpful.
He's going to come down here.
I came down here. Can you hear me now?
Oh yeah, much better.
Good.
Thanks.
I'm Dennis Sproul. I'm one of the council members. The reason I'm talking so much about CDOT, we asked them to come down and do a survey for us, and we know Cortez, and we know what we need, and as you saw from the survey, most of the surveys included the safety factor on South Broadway, but they told us that they did their study and they didn't find any problems. And I'm wondering, do you have any play with CDOT? Will they play with you, or is it one of these things we just go and ask them and they may or may not listen?
We don't have any special ins with CDOT, no. I mean, I can tell you we calibrated this plan. Like I said, we're not without trying to touch the actually, we did float some ideas that would have touched the roadway, like taking out the medians, adding on-street parking. But the feedback was that generally would be too difficult. So we're trying to find things that can improve South Broadway without necessarily needing CDOT participation. But if I had a special in with CDOT, I'd be happy to share it with you.
Gotcha. If we need some turn lanes down there, is that something that you could, that this plan would pay for a entranceway to a trailer park or a business? CDOT says they'll be happy to do it at an extreme amount of money, but is this something that your plan could help pay for safety reasons?
Do you mean pay? Well, no.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you mean installing them or designing them, but generally there's a specific, and I'll let Dave hop in here, there's a specific list of uses, again, remembering how this is funded for brownfield properties, there's a specific list of uses that are permissible with the funding. If the question is designing it, I will step aside and say that Stantec as a company does have the disciplines to do that. But Dave, I'm going to guess that designing or building those are not eligible under the grant.
We have on occasion gotten EPA to approve using grant funding for up to 30% design on certain types of infrastructure. So, you know, we could potentially, if CDPHE, who is actually the grant holder, if they agreed to that and EPA agreed to that, we could potentially see about finding some money to start a design for turn lanes, but couldn't take it all the way to final design. And then, as Rhonda said, the grant definitely wouldn't pay to construct those, but that's about the best we could do with the grant funding that's available with this grant.
Okay, thank you.
I had can you hear me so I don't have to go up? Can you hear me, or? I used to be a teacher. Check, teacher.
I'll repeat it if you.
Okay. I just wanted to say that I agree with Dennis Spruill about the corridor in terms of working with CDOT. And I'm wondering if it's a chicken and the egg kind of a thing, so that if we had a bicycle and walking corridor on the west side, that might compel CDOT to lower the speed limit in that area.
Did you hear that? If Councilmember Kefauver said that if it's kind of a chicken and egg kind of thing, but if we were to build out some pedestrian areas along the road, would that encourage CDOT to take a look at the speed again? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
It would certainly be up to CDOT, but I think it's chicken and egg, and it's actually two chickens and two eggs. It's not only having that facility, it would also be to start seeing the volume of use of that facility to create a warrant for that. I'm thinking it would probably, really it would be getting more pedestrians and cyclists in the corridor, particularly crossing the street. The land uses, the more uses you have, the more cars that you have turning into actual uses, and traffic on the side streets, I think would also encourage that. I mean, we do want to acknowledge it is a state roadway, and you know its mission is to move vehicles and freight. However, you know, there are instances throughout the state of Colorado where there are lower speed limits on state highways, and there are certainly more frequent signalizations. Steamboat is always the one I think of, Highway 40 that goes through there. It also goes through Winter Park. So I think the answer to your question is, yeah, it's a chicken and egg. And that's, again, that's a constant conversation with CDOT.
And I just had one more comment regarding strategy 3 on the public parks. I'm glad that you said the park doesn't have to be in the exact spot, because that's an area that quite often floods when we get any small amount of rain. And I think it may be a hard sell for the public to begin putting in another park without doing any extra work on the park on 7th Street.
We did, so that particular parcel, we did look at it, and you're correct. About half that parcel is in the floodplain. But really, there are, let me think, 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 owners on that. We liked the location on the north side of 7th Street because it's not right on Broadway, but it's close to the renovation of the Mesa Verde Inn, so that there's you know, a new density of residents that will be right there. And it's also right across from the northern terminus of that Mesa View trail that comes up from Hawkins Preserve. So I believe, for instance, if that park slid a little bit to the west, but not the whole way to Broadway, that it is not as at risk for flooding. But again, we did look up the ownership, and we never want to put a target on somebody's property, so we didn't know what anybody's particular plans for that is. In particular, the parcel directly west of where we called it is owned by the same company that purchased the Mesa Verde Inn to renovate it, so not aware of what their plans might be, if it's a parking lot or an entrance. I think knowing what people's plans are can identify the best location for a park, and then perhaps the best design. And it doesn't have to be that size either. It's just the idea of adding some space, however, you know, a modest size.
Yeah, hi Rhonda and Dave. This is Lydia DeHaven. I was the council member involved with this plan. I just wanted to say thank you for helping get so many people involved, and also Rachael Marchbanks and Helen West. And I think you did a really good job capturing everybody's input. And just based on these council comments, I think the idea is that a plan like this, especially with CDOT, is something that can be a powerful tool that we use in our advantage, where we say, hey, we have this plan where we have actually solidified community input and what we want to see developed in this area. And then also we did get the results of the school study, and that was in our favor. So I think this can really go hand in hand with that. And then in addition, in the development and continuation of our update of the land use code. And you know, I think the parks, while we do need to recognize the issue with the Southside Park being part of that working group, that's something that we heard over and over again. And I would say it was a pretty diverse and well-attended working group, where we had a lot of different members of the community come in and express similar feelings. So I'm excited to see this come together, and I think you did a really good job of wrapping up everybody's input. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, if there's nothing else for this, we'll move on to item B, which is the airport terminal design study.
Thanks.
Thank you guys, by Alliance Architects, and presented by our airport director, Jeremy Patton.
Good evening, Madam Mayor Pro Tem and City Council. So let me make sure that Garver and Alliance can hear me. You guys hear me okay? Ben? All right, let me make sure I switch you guys audio. So council, while I get this audio, we had it working before. This is a kind of an informational presentation. I just asked that we put it on this workshop, really not required yet. I just wanted to update you guys on the terminal design study that we've been working on. It's been close to a year, I would think. This was funded by ARPA funds through the city. We do not have construction funds secured yet, but I just want to let Alliance and Garver present the deliverables to you. There's a couple options that kind of work on optimizing security, ergonomics, and modernization of the terminal, which impacts our future development, Part 139 certification, airport operations on the ramp, etc. So I'm going to let them go into the details for you. Ben, let me try this again. Can you hear me? I switched audio here.
Yep, I can hear you.
All right, now council can hear you as well. You can't see them obviously, but they can hear you, and the presentation will be up on the screen. So you want to share your screen? Go right ahead.
Alrighty, 1 second here.
And again, Alliance is a subcontractor, council, to Garver Engineers, my on-call for the airport, and they've been working hand in hand to develop this study for us.
So Jeremy, just to confirm, you can see the screen?
Yes. Council, can you guys see that okay?
Perfect.
Let me just...
Just let me know when you guys are ready and we'll get into it.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Ben.
All right, perfect. So good evening, everyone. Just a couple quick introductions. I'm Ben Johnson, a principal at Alliance, a senior terminal designer planner, and with me is April Meyer.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you for having us this evening. Also a principal with Alliance, senior terminal designer focused on interiors.
So a brief agenda for tonight. We wanted to talk about two primary items in the overall study. So the terminal expansion study itself, and then take you through an exercise we've been working on with Jeremy and others called Sense of Place. And we'll have some great imagery to go through there. Feel free to ask questions along the way. So getting into the terminal expansion study, we were originally hired via Garver to look at the existing terminal building and then find ways to satisfy some goals. Those goals included expanding the gate hold area for larger aircraft and additional passengers. So number 7 here is the existing hold room area with seats for 9 to 11 passengers. And then bring security screening checkpoint up to the current TSA standards. That's number 5 on the plan. It's significantly undersized from what today's planning standards are. And then look at providing amenities on the secure side. So restrooms beyond the checkpoint. Currently today, those only exist outside the checkpoint, which maybe works for smaller aircraft, but with the goal and aspiration to bring larger aircraft into the airport, wanting to get those amenities on the secure side. And then really the last piece was an exercise in sense of place. So bringing the identity of Cortez to the airport through design and finishes. So one of the first pieces we started with was really identifying those program elements that need to fit within the fit within the expansion area for the terminal building. So think of them like the Lego blocks that we're going to start arranging in the plan. On the right-hand side are all the components that go with the security screening checkpoint. On the left-hand side, you see blocks representing restrooms, the gate hold room areas, and then some of the support spaces, including mechanical and electrical. As we worked on the study, we identified the primary expansion area is in between the existing ARF and airport manager's office and the existing terminal building. So that's identified in this large teal colored shape. And then really when we started looking at the expansion, one of the key pieces was the checkpoint orientation. So the top diagram on the right here is orienting the checkpoint in the same orientation today, only expanding it. And if you remember how small it was in the previous, this is bringing that up to standard. So it's significantly larger than the existing checkpoint area. We also looked at rotating the checkpoint and moving that perpendicular. So from the parking lot side where the queue is through the checkpoint to recomposure and ultimately out to the gate hold area. So where we landed with the preferred planning diagram was that rotated security screening checkpoint, allowing for a larger gate hold area and future expansions that could build back towards the existing terminal building and create larger bag claim areas and larger amenities for passengers. Just looking at some of the concept design we worked on. We didn't go full design, but wanted to put some images together just to show how this could shape up. So number 1 on the screen is the existing terminal footprint, and then 2 would be the expansion. So about roughly the same size as your existing terminal building, so doubling the overall square footage of the terminal building. When we look at that from the air side, rotating the gate for the aircraft, it'd still be ground boarding, but you see we could stand up a new building, create some glass on the air side, creating views to the mountains across the airfield, and then maybe looking at some ways to grab some of the north light and bring that into the space. Rotating around to land side, this is representative of the parking project that will be under construction. So the new terminal building on the left with some office space directly adjacent to the drop-off. And then you see that clear story light and roof popping up to drive light into the gate hold areas. And then down at the street level, this would be drop-off. Going to the right would take you over to the existing terminal building and front door ticketing. And then there could be a shortcut directly to the security screening checkpoint off to the left. So again, conceptual design, we didn't get into detailed design, but more of a what-if scenario as we looked at the expansion diagrams. So moving into the next piece, I'm gonna transition here to the sense of place and turn things over to April.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. So part of our process is at the very beginning, we really want to establish a vision, and that vision acts as a foundation that can provide a sense of inspiration for design. And a big piece of that vision is creating a sense of place that is memorable, meaningful, authentic to Cortez as a community, but also as a gateway to the surrounding region. So we have some tools in our toolbox that we're going to share today with you on a few of the workshops that we've been doing with Jeremy and others. They really are there to help us solicit conversations. So one thing I want to caveat is anything that you see today is really intended for internal use only and to really get at that engagement piece. But Ben, why don't you kick us off if you wouldn't mind?
So one of the first pieces is really looking at the catchment area. So the circles on this diagram represent 20-mile radiuses. So we went out to about, I think 140 miles, and just to look at what sort of attractions are in the area, and they are rich. What we did with that then was overlay the driving distance, which actually takes into account terrain. So the sort of amoeba-shaped thing represents a 2-hour radius from Cortez and just what's captured within that. But then even looking at Moab, you know, it's just out of reach of that 2-hour driving radius, but really the core of this was Cortez is the center to a lot of great attractions in the Southwest.
So the first kind of step in our process in developing we develop what we call concept categories, and these categories are really intended to start painting a picture that captures the essence, of course, the community, culture, and the region, as Ben was describing, because it is really truly magnificent, and it's in your back door, which is I'm very envious, I'm going to say. But to do that, we use a lot of imagery, and one thing I want to say is the imagery that we're going to show today, again, is really meant for internal use. We're not suggesting that anything is meant to be, you know, put on a wall in the airport, but really just to help us have those conversations with Jeremy and the others. So we developed 5 concept categories, and it is interesting where Cortez really is at this really interesting kind of apex, if you will. So I'm going to start, which probably should be the most obvious one, is what we're calling majestic landscape, and really highlighting the diversity and the beauty of the region that really surrounds you. And with this diversity of landscape and topology, the second category, concept category, is what we're calling gateway to adventure, because it's kind of the catalyst to allow the notion of exploring and discovering, and again, that the spirit of adventure. This is a little bit seasonal because the next one we have called Winter's Playground. And again, you know, within that 200-mile radius, there's just so much that can be kind of unearthed and the beauty both throughout all of the seasons. And then fourth, Heritage and Home, trying to get more kind of really into Cortez, capturing a little bit more of the essence of what I would call kind of the vibe, the culture, some of the festivals, some of what's happening within the community, and putting kind of a tone to that, which also I think highlights the richness within the community. And then finally, the fifth category we're calling From the Land, really trying to give nod to the agricultural heritage that goes, you know, thousands of years old. Of course, maybe the agriculture itself has changed, but this has been such an important point for trade and other aspects going back, obviously, deep into history. So the resiliency of that, kind of the essentialness of that as it relates to this region and the community proper. So those were the 5 concept categories that we had developed for conversation to start getting at, you know, what is really the most authentic parts of the sense of place that we really want to maybe start highlighting or thinking about when we start going into potential design. But one of the comments that came out of the group that we were talking with was really the idea of Gateway to Adventure and Winter's Playground are kind of one of the same categories. So we ended up kind of mushing them, I guess, together and renaming it Year-Round Playground. So that's where we ended up after our second workshop relative to the categories. After that workshop, it was really wonderful conversation. In fact, I went back and listened to the recording, you know, 3 or maybe 4 times because it was very lively, and I think it was just wonderful to get the feedback that we got. So our next step in our process is what we call creating a story space. Story spaces really are there to add a different lens to the sense of place. And so it's about kind of capturing it in words, I guess, basically, what we heard. I will say that we are not professional copywriters, we are designers. And again, this is just meant for us to be able to play back to the group and make sure what we heard was what we thought we heard is actually accurate. So the story space that we developed, and you can pull it up, Ben, and I will read it, is one, and I will just say this too, the words that are bolded are words that were direct quotes that came out of our conversations. And not that I know, I'm going to just read this. Welcome to Cortez, a thriving, diverse, friendly community. This historical meeting point of people has a rich agricultural, natural, and cultural heritage dating back over 10,000 years. Nestled at the base of the Utes and La Plata and San Juan mountain ranges, Cortez is centrally located to many attractions such as Mesa Verde National Park, Monument Valley, and Four Corners. From its charming downtown with local shops and restaurants to scenic byways and majestic views, Cortez is your gateway to adventure and culture. Whether you are seeking unique experiences, a quiet night sky, or a day hike with family, this year-round playground awaits you.
Awesome. Thank you, April. You got any? Is that the last slide, April?
We've got a couple more.
Okay.
Yep, we have a couple more things. So our kind of next step in all of this is after we've kind of gone through the imagery, we've gone through the concept categories, we've developed different lens to look at it as kind of a story space. We try to put it, I'm going to say a little bit more real. And so we developed 2 mood boards. Mood boards are really there to give us an essence of feeling. So you will see real finishes and colors, but it's really there to try and take what we've kind of heard and say, hey, this is how all of this can start to inspire us, whether it's through color, texture, pattern, just the feeling. And so the intent of the mood boards is not to say this is the tile that we're suggesting or this is the paint color, but more about how does it feel? Does it feel right? Does it feel like someone coming into this space will feel like they're in kind of a magical, memorable place? So we have two concepts that we've developed. I'll let you go to the first one there, Ben. So the first one, both of these are going to really take inspiration from the natural environment, whether it's in the tone or the striation, you know, that you find in the sandstone. I want to be really careful to say that you know, looking at something like this, we do have a Navajo rug from the 1800s, not to suggest that we would do that, but rather that it's when the textiles and all of it, the graphic, the geometries that we see within some of those types of textiles could be very inspirational from a design standpoint and abstracting them, but even just the colors that come kind of to the foresight or the foreground within the imagery. So that's our first mood board, maybe a little saturated, but there's, you know, trying to bring in some of those kind of rich tones that are very also kind of textural. It's not like, you know, slick tiles. It's a little bit more handmade, if you will. The second concept, also taken from nature, is a little bit more kind of high desert, if you will. Again, looking at how we might take a pattern, if you will, and abstract it or turn it into something that has the feeling of something. We're very sensitive to, we would be very sensitive to not doing something that was inappropriate relative to our Native American culture, because we know that can be very, very sensitive. But bringing in some of those, the feelings of the surrounding views that you see in your backyard. Again, kind of a little bit jealous about that. I think we have a landing page, Ben, that has both of them together. And again, this is just a starting point. As if design moves forward and continues, this would be just a starting point from a foundational standpoint that we would maybe start to build off of. But that's kind of where we landed. I'll just pause or stop talking, I guess, at this point.
Thanks, April. That was awesome. And just council, so you're also aware, the discussion she brought up with the kind of the workshops we were doing, there was 2 of them, and that included Rachael and Helen from the Economic Development Department. So we had some really good engagement with that. And then moving forward, you know, we could also put this on ClearGov. We can bring in more public input. Again, this is just a design study, very, you know, early stages, and with construction to be determined. Hopefully in the next 2 to 3 years, we should be able to secure some funding between revenue generation at the airport and various grant funding that's out there with the airline or airport terminal program, and depending on how our AIP funding, Airport Improvement Program funding goes. Currently, this is not a priority, as the airport movement areas are more of that. But I just, again, wanted to update you guys on this, as well as some of the staff that has not seen this yet. And there's plenty of time and opportunity for input. And with that, you know, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. We've also got Jake Hoban with Garver on here as well.
Well, I really appreciate the fact that we've got restrooms beyond the checkpoints planned into this, which is totally appropriate. And I appreciate that we've got a lot of time ahead of us to look at this. But I think another basic necessity for travelers, at least on this end, departing and actually coming in, is that secondary to restrooms, we also have water availability so that people can fill up. So thanks, but yeah, thanks so much for the work you've done. This looks very thoughtful, and I look forward to what's coming ahead.
Yeah, appreciate it. Could you guys hear that at all? I know the mics aren't really connected there.
We picked up a little bit.
Okay, yeah, and there's a recording, we can follow up after, but yeah, there was mention about the benefit of the restrooms and water and services on the other side of the checkpoint, so they're appreciative of that.
Jeremy, I have a question for you. As you pursue the license for us to get larger planes, if that licensure and the larger planes line up before our airport remodel, will we be able to handle that influx of traffic with kind of what we have now if the timing isn't right?
Yeah, it's yes and no. Yes, in the sense that we can modify a screening procedure that would require us to screen people and board at the same time, which is not ideal. Generally, you want security to finish screening passengers and the ground support equipment and crew are getting the aircraft ready rather than board while people are screening, because the screening could create a delay. Therefore, they would just have to be more strict. If someone does create an unnecessary delay in screening, they could get booted off the flight, and that can create problems. Generally, you want your sterile area to be sterile and secured for the time that screening is being completed, all the passengers are through, and then you start the boarding process. But it is possible, it's just not ideal. Going from 9-seat aircraft 4 times a day to 30 or potentially 50, depending on the jet, you cannot fit that many people on the sterile side of the terminal currently. Mm-hmm. So, we really need to expedite some, getting construction funding secured, but it hasn't been a priority for a long time, and we're just trying to now make it a priority. It's not a deal breaker, like I said, and it's a big element to this, though. It is a hindrance to getting that certification.
And then I just had one more comment about the mood boards. I just really love the incorporation of the natural and cultural environment in Cortez, but I also think it would be a really good opportunity for partnership with our neighboring Native communities, especially for incorporating their designs and making sure that we're doing things appropriately and inviting like the Ute, Mountain Ute, and Navajo to the table as we think about that moving forward.
That's a good point. And that came up in our workshops essentially, and that's it. That is a priority. The airport's location in itself is, we're at the transition from desert Southwest and the native landscape and the tribe itself, and then up to alpine mountains. So we want to try to incorporate everything while being cognizant of those factors, which is why we should engage more of the public as this moves forward.
I think when I first heard A Sense of Place, I immediately went to the ancestral Puebloan influence, and I was kind of concerned with the 5 designs. And as I looked a little bit closer, I saw that they're really that idea is incorporated throughout, which I really do appreciate. And I just would encourage for that element regarding the 5 different concepts to remain there, because I think that really is, Mesa Verde, Hovenweep, all of these sites that we have that people come to see are really important. And to me, when I think of the concept of a sense of place, that's immediately where I go when I think about our area. So
right.
Thanks for that.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
Well, thank you so much, and thank you to our presenters and for giving us this update. I'm excited to see the airport change and grow, so thanks, Jeremy. So we'll move on to item C on our agenda, which is general council discussion.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, I would like to make the council aware of a situation that I learned about in the community that I think is pretty serious, and it has to do with the Good Samaritans food pantry and kind of a dire situation that they're in right now. There's a very real threat that they will have to close within the next 2 months. And I know that they've gone from 5 staff down to basically 2 staff at this point. They serve roughly 100 people during the Thanksgiving holiday with turkeys and those sorts of things. And the reason why I know this and have a little bit of background is that for the past few months, I've actually been a volunteer there. And I can give an example. On Friday when I volunteered from 12 to 2, there were about 40 families that came in on the first shift. There were at least another 20 families that came in the second shift. And each one of those families is allowed to come every other week because the need is substantial. So we can't provide boxes of food for families on every single week. So, for example, we had a family of 6 come in and 5 young children, and we had to say, oh, here's one thing of hamburger for the next 2 weeks and a variety of canned goods, and that's the most that we could do. And I know that the situation really came about because there's a national organization that grants food pantries grants for operations every single year. And Good Samaritan Center over the past few years has gotten around $50,000 from that organization every year. This year, that amount was reduced to $9,000. So a shortfall of $41,000. I also know that they're members of the Rocky Mountain Food Pantry organization, and that typically, when we get food from that organization, it's around 3 pallets. It's been around half a pallet the last few times. And I believe it was back in April, maybe May, when there was a change in SNAP benefits, and all the food pantries were kind of like, we're going to see a big influx here of people coming in, and that's exactly what's happened. I can say, as someone who's there every week, I see brand new people all the time that I wouldn't expect necessarily to be your typical shopper. And so the need is pretty dire with a very limited amount of funding. And also, in doing a little bit of research, I know that the Cortez City Council has a line item in the budget, and that the Cortez City Council has not expended $10,000 of that budget. So between now and the end of the year, which is just a few weeks, that $10,000 is just going to sit there. I'm not proposing to use all $10,000 to support the Good Samaritan Food Pantry, but I would like to make a proposal that we spend half of that or $5,000 to support the Good Samaritan Food Pantry. So instead of just letting that money kind of sit there between now and the end of the year, that we support the pantry and help them get through at least the end of this year, and hopefully there'll be some sort of a Hail Mary for the beginning of next year as well. So I don't know how council feels about it. That's kind of the background information I have, very much firsthand, and I'd be more than willing to answer any questions or talk about any thoughts about that or something along those lines, but anybody has any?
I have a question, Matt. What have they done to inform the community? Because, speak for myself, this is the first time I've heard of this situation.
So it's actually, I think up to this point, Bill, been more action-oriented. So, for example, we really tried to push the Fill the Bus initiative this past Saturday at Safeway. And I was there as a volunteer and went on the radio and kind of challenged guys that don't necessarily like to get out and shop for canned goods to come and make monetary donations. And we were there for about 6 hours and got about $1,100 in donations and just around 1,000 pounds of food for that. That 1,000 pounds will not last very long. And I know there's been a lot of outreach to individuals in the community and businesses in the community. And I'm not just up here asking without putting something behind it myself. Cliff Rose Garden Center made a pretty substantial donation yesterday towards the end, not enough by any means. And I have personally, over the last couple months, with my business and my own personal finances. So we're trying to be active about it, I think, first, and not make it a complete panic situation. But in my mind, it is pretty dire, to be honest.
Can you speak to the underlying core issues, or what your understanding may be as to why the Good Samaritan and the national organization that has been making these, much greater contributions to us have backed off?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. I think it's cuts in funding just overall, but then more food banks applying for more assistance. And again, tied to the reduction of SNAP benefits that happened. That was not just here in Colorado. I think that's kind of the issue with the food bank of the Rocky Mountains. Colorado definitely has seen cut back in those benefits. And so they're being asked to spread the amount that they had amongst more organizations doing the same work. So that's my take on it.
And the influx of people in general, can you speak to that? So we're seeing greater numbers, and I've appreciated this as I've been in the area over there recently. I'm seeing lines of people like you're talking about.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like that's that 100%. So I think when I first started volunteering, we would maybe have 30 or 40 families that came in. We would have 3 or 4 that were brand new that we would have to orient to the pantry and the setup and what shopping looks like in the pantry. And just this past Friday, I would say that was closer to 10 new families. It's unprecedented. Brand new, people that I've never seen before who need assistance. And I believe my heart of hearts that it's genuine assistance. It's a true need, and it's pretty hard to take advantage of a system when you can only access it every other week.
Along those lines, can you speak to, are there pre-qualifications that the Good Samaritan Bank, that the Good Samaritan Food Bank actually requires of these people, or is it just come in, stand in line, and these are our rules?
So it's a little bit of both. We do ask for general sort of background information, but nothing really specific in terms of financial need and where, someone comes from and those sorts of things, because I think that the pantry has kind of a long-standing policy of it's hard enough for families to come and ask without feeling maybe that those questions are leading or maybe judging around it. I believe that there are people who really need the food. I can see it. They're appreciative. They shop with discretion when they're there. And I don't feel like there are that many people that would in any way, shape, or form take advantage of the pantry.
I've got a question for our city manager. That line item that Councilmember Keyhofer was referring to, the $10,000, how has that been used, if it's been used in the past?
That is actually the council contingency line, and most of the time we don't even touch it. It's there in case of emergency. It could be for legal fees. It could be for any, just like I said, any sort of contingency that's needed. But generally, we don't even touch it.
Thank you.
Will that money be re-upped in 2025 then?
It is budgeted for 2025, should it pass this evening, yes.
Well, I myself think, and he used the key word many, many times, families, and that's what we're all about. I mean, if we have a family in need, I think the city of Cortez has always been there and should always be there. So in my opinion, if we have money that's sitting there that can help a family, I would like to see them use it.
Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Sproul. I think we're also in a really good place in our budget, which hopefully we'll approve later on this evening, and we've worked really hard to get there, and we have the funds to support it. And it's a need that's growing all over the country. I mean, when it costs my family so much more to get groceries every week, I'm still shocked. So I know that this influx is just happening, and it's hopefully we can find some solutions and these resources can be reallocated so we don't have to be the supporter all of the time, but it would be a good thing to do right now.
Do we know if they apply?
Council member, I can speak to that. No, they did not apply last year or this year.
Is the money that's in that fund right now, if it was not used, it would be, so it's allocated for 2025 is my understanding from what I'm hearing, and we're not in 2025. Is there any funds left in the 2024, which is where we're currently at? And I think, Matt, you're asking for a 2024 distribution. So how do we have anything left in the 2024?
Yeah, that specific line has not been touched for fiscal year 2024, so there is $10,000 in there currently, and we did request to rebudget that for 2025. That's usually a reoccurring thing so that we can make sure the council has money should something arise. So yes, it'll be in 2025 should that pass this evening. We do have it right now that could be spent in fiscal year 24.
All right, thank you. Matt, I don't have much information on the SNAP benefits being decreased in the state of Colorado recently, and I'd like some time to sort of look into that, because I know we have government programs in place that are administered by the county that are there, and I don't have any further information on that, and I wouldn't expect you to have that information, but I do believe it's an opportunity for us to look at what's currently available in the community and how it's being used, and before any decisions are made. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
And I would just say I've been in contact with the people at the Montezuma County Food Bank. There's also a food bank. So I had a woman who didn't quite understand that they can only come every other week. And she had it was a difficult conversation, but I had to send her to the food bank there, and they're in a similar situation as the county. So I don't think it's isolated, and I'm not sure that they exactly have the resources either to fill in the gap.
Well, I think if we were going to move forward with this, we would have to bring it to a vote at another meeting, correct?
Yeah, that's correct, Mayor Pro Tem. So given what has been said this evening, should council give me direction to go back and analyze this and then come forward in 2 weeks with an agenda item that could formally be voted on in the public meeting? In the stated meeting is the right way to handle that.
There will be more information available to us at that time, is my understanding also, or is that just sort of a flat out, this is what we want to do, put up there?
Yeah, I will do whatever council asks us to do. We can do more research or just kind of go with what you've been given this evening with testimony of a council member, indicating that need. So whatever council directs me to do, we will fulfill.
I don't speak for the whole council, but I believe it's appropriate we get more data provided to us as far as what's available out there, numbers, because this is asking for an allocation of a budget line item, which is given to us in the form of taxes, which is taxpayer money that's put into our budget to go basically for a non-governmental organization to use as they see fit, which I think everybody at this table is in agreement that if people are hungry, we want to make sure they get fed. However, I think we need to be wise in our utilization of taxpayer money. So I just would like to be sure we get as much information as possible.
Okay, we can certainly look into that. given what this is and who the potential donor would, or the recipient of that would be, that's a little out of our wheelhouse. We'll have to get our grant writer involved a little bit to try to find out what else is available. That truly is outside of what we normally would do. That's we could maybe contact them and ask them what else they've done, and that might be more appropriate since that's actually in their wheelhouse.
Okay. So seeing no other council discussion items, I'll go.
Just for clarity, sorry, council, just for clarity, you would like this brought back for an agenda item next meeting?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, council.
Okay, any other items for discussion? Seeing none, I'll go ahead and close this meeting, and we will adjourn until 7:30 for our regular meeting.